Hi, and welcome to the Cozy Self-Discovery Podcast. Join me, Jenny, for some cozy chats about self-discovery and how discovering who you are can change your life like it's changed mine. Grab a drink and a blanket or whatever makes you feel nice and cozy, and let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the Cozy Self-Discovery Podcast. It's me, Jenny. I'm your host, and we are back for episode 2. And I hope that you are very cozy, as am I. I've got like this hoodie on, I've got my leggings and some warm cozy socks. And grab yourself a warm beverage or a big old blanket, and let's do some cozy chatting about the process of self-discovery and this whole world, because it's a really interesting place to jump into, and I'm excited that you are here jumping into it with me. So let's get started with our discussion today. So today I wanted to chat about what self-discovery is exactly and why do it. So it's one of these buzzwords right now. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the personal development world these last few years, especially since the pandemic happened. And a lot of people were afforded a lot more time than they normally had to sit back, not be as out and about in the world, and take some time, some quieter time, some time to themselves, some time to sit and not be constantly running around doing everything for everyone, and, some time to just sit and think about their lives and figure some things out. I know that was when I really first started getting into self-discovery. For me, it also came hand in hand with the fact that in the fall, right before the pandemic started, I separated from my husband of 12 years. We were together for 14 years, and we were in the process of figuring out separation and divorce when the pandemic started. So here I was. I had been constantly with someone else for the previous 14 years. And even though as someone who is more of an omnivert, but I do really have introverted qualities where my alone time is very important to me. I'm of the highly sensitive variety, I'm empathic, and I am a multi-potentialite. There's just like a bunch of things about me. I'm a human design projector that really just add up to I am the type of person who really, really needs to have their time away from others, centering and grounding and being with myself so that I can be in my own space, clear my head, be in my body to understand what I think and how I feel, and get back to that feeling of real comfort and motivation within myself, where I feel like I'm not constantly just living for other people and going from one thing to the next and just surrounding myself with other people's energy all the time to constantly keep me going and give me energy and motivation. That doesn't necessarily work for me. For me, that can often be very overwhelming, and it can cause me to really get out of touch with myself. And so during that quarantine time, for me personally, I was experiencing the first time in, 15, well, it was really longer than that. Really the first time in forever when I had just days at a time where I was completely alone. I do have a child. I have an 8-year-old son. And, when you do separate, we started obviously co-parenting, and my son spent half of the week with his dad. And so there was, days at a time when I was just completely alone in my house, just taking care of myself, just being with myself, trying to navigate what was happening in the world, what was happening in my own life, and also going through this process of trying to figure out what was next for me and what my future looked like. And that also felt like just the perfect opportunity for me to really do some work, to dive deep into myself, figure out exactly who I was now that I was not a half of another person's life, you know? Now that I was my own person and I was not required to make every decision that I made work for someone else's life as well. I had more control and more input into where I lived and how I was living and what I wanted my days to look like and how I wanted things to look and what my daily practices were going to be and how I spent my time and how I pursued happiness. And it felt like all of a sudden the floodgates opened, you know, and I just had like all of this agency that I often had felt was kind of lacking in my life beforehand. And when you have that much agency all of a sudden, you say to yourself, you know, like, well, what am I going to do with this? I need to find the things that really feel right to me because I don't have to cooperate with someone else's desires as well. I don't need to make my life comfortable for other people. My life can be my life. But what does that mean? When I started to think about it, a lot of the things that I was sort of defaulting to in life in the past weren't necessarily being done because they were what was the best fit for me or because they were what was most comfortable for me or what made me the happiest or what made most sense for who I was as a person. And I started realizing that I had been making so many decisions and living my life in a way that was really trying to accommodate the needs of others, and in doing so, abandoning my own needs in a lot of circumstances. So personal development, I think, kind of shot to the top of a lot of people's priority lists during this time for very similar reasons. They were spending a lot of time alone or just like in their home with their family, and they were able to take the time to reflect on how they had been living and whether that was still working for them. Yes, I know a lot of people did come out of the pandemic ending relationships, making big changes, shifting careers, finding new things to focus on. And I think there's good reason for that. A lot of people went through this process of starting down the road of self-discovery. So what is self-discovery? Self-discovery really at its core is just developing any type of self-reflective practice or habit or behavior in order to know yourself better. That's really what it is. Self-reflection can look like many different things. There are many different ways that you can take part in self-discovery. There's different practices you can adopt. And it is not a one-size-fits-all thing. There is no formula of self-discovery where you can say, yes, here is your checklist, do this and this and this and this, and then you will self-actualize. You will have discovered who you are, and you'll be done with the self-discovery process. You did it. Check mark. Gold star. Congrats. Here's your certificate of completion. That's not how it works. It's a process that doesn't necessarily have an ending, and it doesn't look the same for every person. The things that worked and helped me may not work and help you. The books that I read may not be the books that you're reading. The things that I was doing may not resonate with you, and that's completely okay because self-discovery is entirely personal. There are definitely things that I'm going to be talking about on the podcast in terms of the different types of practices that you might explore, the different tools that you might use to help figure things out as part of your self-discovery journey, the processes and practices and habits that you might explore, and the ways that they can help you and help flesh out your journey and help you learn more about yourself to get yourself to a place where you feel like the life that you're living is more in alignment with who you actually are inside and less about pleasing other people and the world. And so there's a lot of things that, we can cover and we can talk about, and we're going to dive into a whole bunch of it, and it's going to be real fun. But yeah, at its core, self-discovery is about doing self-reflection, looking inside, actually thinking and asking questions and getting inside of what's under your skin. and understanding yourself better and figuring new things out that you didn't realize before. Making knowing yourself part of the practice that you take into how you live your life, instead of maybe just living a life that feels like it's on autoplay, where you just do the same thing every day to make money or do the job that you think that you have been given, or play the role that you have identified with in the past. You don't necessarily have to stop, being the mother or the high-achieving, academic or the whoever you've identified with. It doesn't mean that you might end up upheaving your entire life, or maybe it does. People are all coming to self-discovery from different places and with different histories, different experiences, different levels of understanding about themselves and about the world. It might just look like getting yourself into therapy so that you can work with a professional in the field of psychology who knows a lot about how to help guide you through the process of reflecting on your life and tackling the things that are causing you pain and the questions that you have and the things that you need to work through in order to get to a better place. I have been there and I have done that too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach self-discovery and a lot of different reasons why you might choose various tools or methodologies or practices as part of your journey. For me, I started doing, I'd always been a journaler, I journaled for ages, but a lot of my journaling was more like, hey, this is what I did today. Isn't it crazy that such and such happened? It wasn't terribly deep. And so when I started having more time to sit back, sit down with my tea in the morning and actually carve out a little bit more of a practice to help me be more intentional in the way that I started my day. Part of that was to add journaling as a daily practice. I don't do it every day anymore, but sometimes I still do. And for a while, I did journal pretty much every day. And this journaling was not just about what I did the day before. It was a lot more about how I was feeling and the natural reactions that I was having to the things that were occurring in the world and in my personal life, and my thoughts about that, and why that I thought I might be feeling certain ways or having certain reactions to things, or what I thought about might be the best outcome for the future or what I wanted for the future. And just even introducing a little bit more of this personal reflection into my journaling started just honing my muscles of getting into that self-reflection mindset where I could just actually take a little bit of quiet time and just write and think about the actual things happening in my life on a little bit of a deeper level. Doesn't always have to be some type of groundbreaking shadow work exercise you're doing or an 8-hour long meditation. Sometimes it can be just as simple as sitting down and writing with a little bit more intimacy about what's going on in your life and how it's making you feel and what you think about it. Just starting to practice that made a big difference for me. I also started introducing gratitude. So in the morning, I would write 5 things I was grateful for. I wrote some affirmations, which turned into kind of a scripting ritual for me, where I would focus on some things that I wanted to happen in my life or things that I was trying to cultivate in my life, and I would write them out in the past tense and be so for example, I had a list that I would read through every morning, and it would be I'm so happy and grateful that I am living in this beautiful house that my son and I can call home, and it is a safe place for us, and I feel good here, and we have minimal stress related to keeping up the house, and everything runs smoothly, and it's a place of peace and happiness for us. So just an example of like just something that I would say in the mornings to remind myself to be grateful for my house and my home and to sort of just help also bring in a little bit more of that energy of just feeling this type of peace and joy in my environment. And that's really, just sort of cultivating it through that type of practice. For me, I also started doing meditations. I know meditation isn't something that everyone is all about, and that's okay. There's different ways to meditate. You can do walking meditations. You can do sitting meditations. You can do a little bit more of like a activity where you have like a meditation playing while you're doing the activity. So you can kind of zone out, even though you are still awake and active. But for me, I would do visualization meditations that were focused on just like listening to myself and getting in touch with myself and my higher self, my inner voice, just like really connecting to myself on the inside, getting out of my head, being in my body. Those type of things were very helpful for me. And then I did start looking for shadow work exercises, which are a more specific and pointed way to actually start doing work on your inner workings and understanding why you are the way you are, why your thought processes and beliefs have formed to be what they are, why you have the type of habits you have, where in your past certain things stemmed from. And a lot of it was related to like uncovering my stories, like what were the stories that I told myself in life? Where did they come from? Why did I think that they were true? Were they actually true? I had a lot of self-limiting stories that I sort of developed in childhood because of some experiences I had and some ways that I was treated or spoken to and some of my relationships. And I developed these type of like stories about myself that like people saw me as incapable or weak. And that because of that, I had developed this type of insecurity around proving that I was not incapable or weak. And sometimes that led to me displaying behaviors that were not great because I was insecure. I would get triggered easily by people who maybe have been suggesting that I couldn't do something by myself. And so I would sometimes get triggered into acting kind of ugly in response to that, or being hyper independent sometimes and like shutting people out and not allowing people to help me. And like it was just really revealing to actually ask some of these type of deeper questions about the belief systems that I had and the stories that I told myself, the limiting beliefs that I had developed. Where did they come from? Why did I have them? Did I have to keep believing in them? Could I change them? Asking those type of questions was huge for me. I feel like now that I understand a lot of my triggers and my limiting beliefs and why I have them, my life has been so different because I'm so much more aware of them now. I can see when I am not reacting rationally to something because I'm being triggered in one of those areas. And I can stop myself and pull back and be like, whoa, 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 Jenny, this is not actually how you want to respond to this because you're being hit on this like deeper emotional level about something that you don't actually have to believe to be true. And you can make a different choice here in how you respond to that and what you believe about yourself. So you can start to rewire those beliefs into something that is more positive and something that is actually more accurate. One of the things that self-discovery does is allow you to really take the time to look inside, look at who you are without other people's influences, and decide, what do you actually believe? What are your actual values? Who are you as a person? What do you actually enjoy? Remove yourself from the influence of everybody else, from your parents and your spouse and all the kids who bullied you when you were young, who made you think and feel a certain way. Take everybody out of the equation and then look actually inside to how you really feel and who you really are. It's common for us to get to a place where we are running on autopilot in the world And we are going through life and making our decisions and just shallowly believing whatever our belief system was that was handed down to us about life, about certain things in life. And just continuing to do that forever without questioning or looking deeper into where that came from and whether or not that actually fits for us, whether that's actually accurate for who we are and who we want to be. And so one of the great things that self-reflection and self-discovery can do is give people the impetus to actually sit down and figure out what their real value system is. A lot of people don't even know what their actual values are. They just assume that whatever they were taught growing up is their value system, but they don't think about it in any more detail than that. They don't actually expand upon that to get to a place where they understand that maybe there's nuance there. Maybe they don't value the exact same things. Maybe there's other things that they've experienced in life that they felt really, really strongly connected to or excited by that they weren't allowed to really follow because of the strictures of whatever life they've been born into. But maybe they really want to value those things. This can happen a lot of times with people who are creative, and maybe they value creativity or the arts or certain ways of expressing themselves that have not been encouraged by those around them. And so they don't think about those things as things that they value. But if they actually were given the time to sit and reflect on that, maybe they really would like to value those things and introduce more of them into their life and make decisions based upon the fact that they value those things. That's right for them, even if it's not right for those other people who don't value it. See, we're all different. We don't have to have the same value systems, right? We don't have to have the same beliefs as our parents or the people who brought us up. And yet so many of us go through life believing that we do. And that's simply not true. But if you don't do self-reflective practices, if you don't ever ask yourself questions, if you don't ever sit down to think, then you will never know if you are simply living on autopilot in a life that you were programmed into, and whether or not that life is actually right for you, or whether there is a much better, more fulfilling, more authentic life right around the corner that you could have if you took the time to actually figure that out and do some work. See, so I studied anthropology in grad school, so I know a lot about human development. And one of the crazy things about how we get just trapped in these cycles is that when people are born, when anything is born, it learns how to be in the world through a couple different processes, but it's largely a process of observation. It's looking at the world around it, and it's learning and watching and seeing what people do. They will usually imitate what they see around them. So observation and imitation is one huge part of how we learn. And then there's a feedback process that we go through where we try new things based on either our instincts or what we have observed and are trying to imitate in those around us. And then that gets put through a feedback system. So the environment that we're in and the people around us will give us feedback on our actions and behaviors and what we're trying to do based on what they think and what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So we get that feedback in the form of body language, facial expressions, words, actions, responses. And so that kind of shapes us as we're growing and learning and changing. Sometimes we may want to try certain things based on our instincts and what we think feels right to do when we're a child. But then our caretakers immediately tell us no, immediately tell us it's wrong. And that forms our, behavioral patterns and our beliefs about that thing. And I know there's a big discussion right now in the gentle parenting world, for example, where a lot of us who are parents in my generation are saying, we are not going to parent our children the same way that we were parented, where our parents really didn't want to deal with us a lot of the time. A lot of these older folks who are boomers or from the silent generation, and, it's the way that they were raised as well, was good kids are quiet. They are seen and not heard. They toe the line. They don't get too messy when it comes to expressing themselves. If they cry, they're told to stop crying. They're told that they'll be given something to cry about. They're threatened. They're told to man up if they're like a little boy who's showing emotions, for example. And this all creates the conditioning for how we grow up and what we believe and what we are conditioned physically and, subconsciously to do and behave like. It's all part of that conditioning from our surroundings and by society at large. Because where do you think those people are getting their perspectives from? It's from who they were raised by and society at large. And so they're still going through that process of feedback where maybe they're trying things and doing things and then society is telling them yes or no, or that's neutral, so like it's okay. But the world that conditions us is also in its own feedback loop. So it's this huge mechanism that just keeps spiraling and spiraling and spiraling. But it isn't really a part of that system in the world that we live in today to allow people to take the opportunity to self-reflect and be with themselves and figure out for themselves how to behave and what feels good to them and what they like and what they don't like. That's told to us. We are informed about those things, right? If a child is born into a culture, they learn that culture's values. They're told that they are their values instead of allowing them to figure it out for themselves when they're young, right? If a child is born into a family that practices a certain religion, most of the time, that child is not told, when you're old enough, we'll inform you about what religion is, and you can do some research on all of the different religions of the world, and then you'll get to decide whether or not you want to partake in any particular religion. No, a lot of the time, from the time they're very little, those children are taught that religion, and they are indoctrinated into the belief system of the religion, and they are told that that is what they are, and that's that. And in a lot of cases, if that child at some point decides to ask questions that threaten the safety that those members of that community feel within that system, they might be ostracized or threatened, or there might be consequences to that. And so a lot of people just learn not to question it, not to have questions, not to say anything, and to just blindly accept because that's just easier for everybody. No one gets in trouble when they just blindly accept. So unfortunately, we turn into adults who have been conditioned in this way. And I'm not saying that conditioning is like, I know that example probably makes it feel extremely negative, but not everything is negative. You're also conditioned on how to stay safe as a child. You're conditioned about what not to do in order to keep you from hurting yourself. Like, this process of feedback has its reasons. It exists and has developed as a part of human behavior over thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of years for a reason. But in today's world, in 2024, we live in a very different society than we did 10,000 years ago, when this was how children were being taught how to survive. Now we're being taught things that are so much more nuanced and can be so much more unhealthy for us, because a lot of what we're being conditioned by is just based on sort of trivial societal trends that change every decade or 50 years, So a lot of what people who are my age were taught when they were young is very different from what our children are being taught today. And it's really tough to try and step back and disentangle yourself from all of that, because there's so many different influences from your parents and friends and from society, everything around you. There's so many different influences to have to step back from and try to disentangle from your life in order to understand, what of all of that actually resonates with me and what doesn't resonate with me, because not everything is going to resonate with you anymore. And that can also change throughout your life. As you age, you might resonate with different things and different belief systems and practices. But what's important is to understand that this process is available to everyone, and it's something that I think everyone should be taking part in throughout their life, to make sure that they are not making decisions about how to live based on all of this conditioning that has come down to them from the society and the culture and the family that they were raised in. Like, we have choices, we have agency, we have freedom to go inside, ask questions about who we are on a deeper level, to see what resonates with us and what doesn't. And if there's other things that we want to be doing or trying or exploring that could actually really, really bring value to our lives, that could lead us to a life where we are much happier and more fulfilled because we are letting in the things that really make us feel more grounded and centered and whole and alive, and letting go of the things that make us feel more disconnected and less free. In the end, it's all about feeling like you are living a life of freedom, freedom to make the choices that are right for you. And I know there was a lot of time that went by where I really felt like I didn't have a lot of freedom in my own life to make the choices that I wanted to make that would have made me happier. And so the more you can unravel all of the systems and the things that have become a part of who you are, I'm not saying you're going to throw everything away. You may not. You may find that there are parts of it that you love and that are really true and like ring true for you. And that's great. But you're probably also going to find out that there's some things that got passed down to you or became like really, really deeply embedded habits and beliefs that are really harmful for you and that you do not want to continue to carry. And you don't have to carry them. Is the amazing part. You don't have to carry them. I have a really good friend who spent her entire childhood in a home where one of her parents was extremely, extremely vocal about her weight, and she was obsessed with appearance and her own unhealthy relationship with food and with her body was passed down to her daughter. And the daughter has spent her entire life trying to deal with the consequences of that. She was programmed with this really unhealthy belief system as a child. And obviously that is not something that she needs to carry or believe in anymore. She does not need to believe the things that were told to her as a child about her own body. She can see her own body as being beautiful and healthy and strong. She can love her body. She can appreciate her body. She can see the good things that she's doing for her body and appreciate that and like be really proud of herself for doing things like that, for eating healthy, for moving. She can have a much healthier relationship with herself and her body and food. But in order to do that, she has to extract that belief system from her. And because of the way that it works, like this isn't just like saying to yourself, well, I don't believe that anymore. No. This is a deeper process. Those type of things are part of your actual subconscious. You hear something enough, it takes hold, it becomes part of your psyche, and it becomes part of your subconscious way of thinking, and you don't even realize it. But a lot of the stuff that we don't even realize was programmed into us and that we've believed and just have become a part of our life and what motivates us to act a certain way or behave a certain way can be changed. There are methods to do that, and I will talk about that in the future. But you will never know that you have these subconscious beliefs that you can change unless you do a little bit of work to think about it and figure that out for yourself. And that's why self-discovery, kids. That's why we do it. And at the core of it, there is always a way to understand and know yourself better in order to gently lead yourself to a better life where you're happier and more fulfilled and doing things and living a life that is more in alignment with who you actually are, what you truly believe, and what you truly value. So that's a little intro to what self-discovery is and what it kind of looks like and why we do it, why I do it. I have a lot more to talk about on this subject, and I will get into the different practices and the different ways that it has impacted me on a more personal level. We'll do some story times. But for today, that's really the basics that I wanted to cover. Just a little bit of like a, little bit of a chat about what it is, why we do it, why we need it. And I hope that it was valuable for you to hear that. I know it took me a little while at first to really understand, like, holy crap, there is a lot here. There is so much to figure out. And it did feel really daunting at first, I will admit. But you just take things one day at a time and you figure out little by little, what are the ways that I can start to implement these things in my life to actually like figure things out and make some changes that are going to be good for me. It's all you can do, really. And thankfully, there's no timeline when you're on this journey. There's no timeline. There's no finish line. You just start and you make a little bit of progress, bit by bit, and eventually you start to see major changes in your life for the better, which is why this is something that I want for everybody. And why I'm very grateful that you're here listening. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jenny, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye.